Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR. He was the president that I chose for my research paper. I chose Franklin because he was the only president to have served 4 terms in history. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born January 30th of 1882 to James and Sarah Roosevelt. He was a very wealthy child. His father was a railroad executive, and his mother also came from a very wealthy family. Franklin spent most of his childhood at home with his mother or vacationing at their vacation home in Campobello Island in Eastport, Maine. Franklin was given a yacht as a young boy as a present by his father, and he also enjoyed conservation and watching the birds. He took a like to birds when he was about 10 years old, and because of his mother, he took up collecting stamps, which research says that by the time Franklin had died, he had over 25,000 stamps that had totaled up to a value of over $1 million. Franklin was tutored at home by his mother and also by private tutors. By the age of 14, he could speak in French, German, and English. At 14 is also whenever he had went on to Groton School for Boys in Massachusetts. He graduated from there and went on to Harvard University and then to Columbia Law School in New York. Probably Franklin's most memorable moment in school was his junior year at Columbia, where he fell in love with Eleanor. Eleanor Roosevelt was his cousin, either his 5th or 6th cousin, depending on which book you read. She was also the niece of President Theodore Roosevelt. Franklin and Eleanor were married on March 17th of 1905, and Theodore Roosevelt was the one to give Eleanor away. An interesting fact that I found was that the bride and groom were actually pretty much ignored during their wedding because President Roosevelt was there. Theodore had been in office maybe I think it was about 3 weeks whenever he had went to marry Eleanor and Franklin. President Franklin was a pretty average student in school. He gained mostly B's and C's. He gained mostly B's and C's in school. He also was a very unique president, as he was one president who, for one, had a very horrible time to serve through, as it was the Great Depression and then again World War II that he had to lead the country through, and also recover the country from the Great Depression. However, most would describe him as probably the most compassionate, friendliest person that they had ever met. Franklin Roosevelt was one of the only presidents that did not ever write an autobiography of himself or really keep a journal of his own personal thoughts during his presidency. So it's hard to find much information about his thoughts and what was going on. There is quite a bit of research that his children or that Eleanor had recorded in books or during interviews of him. I know there was one time right in the Depression, during the worst time of the Depression, when Franklin was actually elected president. It was the happiest moment of his life, and as he was laying in bed that night, he had told his son that he was fearful that he wouldn't be able to do his job. But to the American people, he never showed any fear, only hope and inspiration and encouragement to the American people. There's a lot of recordings of people saying that his compassion is probably what helped them to get through the Great Depression, as he during his first year in presidency, Franklin had did a series of broadcasts over the radio. I think there was about 30 of them, called the Fireside Chats, where he would broadcast himself going and talking to the people. A lot of people had said that he always addressed them as my friends, and that a lot of people really looked forward to this broadcast on Sunday night. They would sit around their fire and they actually felt like Franklin was right there in their living room with him or with them, just talking about the politics and what he was going to do to help them. During Franklin's first 100 days, he had put into many different laws and different things to help the economy, to put forth jobs. He was the president who started the Social Security Act, which we still have to this day, and many people in our world, again, are living off of this. He started various different things that are still into effect today. Probably the most interesting thing that I found about Franklin was just his generosity and his compassion to the American people.